All right. Hello and welcome to Real Talk Office Hours. We call this Hunting for Silver Linings, and it's Friday, June 19, 2020. Hosted today by Corey Hart. Usually we have George Katsanos with us, but he's going to rejoin us on Monday. And we have a very special guest. We have Salah from Amman, from Startup Grind Amman over there. We are brought to you by Startup Grind, the world's largest startup community. We have 600 plus chapters in over 125 countries. We operate with a mission to educate, inspire, and connect. And Startup Grind is driven by three values. That's make friends, not contacts, help others before you help yourself, and give before you take. Now, the reason why we do this is because the pandemic has been and will continue to be the great global leveler. As entrepreneurs, we do our very best for our businesses, our teams, and our families, and we need to be informed, rational, analytical, and rigorous in our thinking. We should also learn to control our biases as they emerge in various circumstances. We do record these live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we invite you to join us, but you can also catch us on startupgrind.com/grand-rapids and YouTube and catch the recordings there. Now, no one has a crystal ball, but if we keep our eyes and ears open and we pay attention, we may be able to see around the bend and with some luck, spot the silver linings that are around every cloud. Normally we do this by doing our financial markets recap, but as George is not with us today, we're just going to jump in and get into the second part of what we do, and that's check-ins with Startup Grind chapter directors, entrepreneurs, and ecosystem stakeholders from across the world. So with all of that, I want to say hi and welcome to Mo. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Taking into consideration the situation, no one can complain. I think I'm so happy, and I think it's quite interesting times to live in, and I think it's something that's completely new for our generation, maybe a couple of generations.
Yes, yeah,
and we're learning, and it's always a learning experience.
Yeah, there is that phrase. You never let a crisis go wasted. You have to learn from it. And as you said, there has not been a moment in recent world history in generations or well over 100 years where there's been an opportunity like this, as especially globally, to emerge and have a choice on how we emerge. So many generations have had things happen to them, and it's been a matter of circumstance and how they handle those circumstances. Now we're faced in a situation where it's not a collection of circumstances, but a collection of choices we get to make. And as entrepreneurs, I think we're the ones that see those silver linings, right? So I do want to start by getting an introduction on your background, your personal background, and then maybe you can finish that up with how you found and ended up with Startup Grind.
Okay, interesting. So I studied management information systems. So half of my studies was technically business management. The other half was computer science. I get both words. I stand somewhere in between. And it helped me a lot understanding what is the business needs when it comes to technology, and how we can monetize technology and make money out of technology. So yeah, this is from my background. I also did e-business and digital marketing. Apart from studies, I have been involved in the entrepreneurship ecosystem for almost now 9 or 10 years. I started with Techstars Startup Weekend community, and then I did a lot of stuff with Seed Stars. They're an entity that helps a lot in the emerging markets, where I'm basically based. And later on, I ended up with Startup Grind. I volunteered with Startup Grind like 6 or 7 years ago, but like I was lucky 2.5 years ago to lead our mission in Jordan. We have 3 chapters here covering the whole country. It's quite a small country. We're only 10 million people, and my involvement in the entrepreneurship ecosystem was like always an eye-opening. It was something that I learned a lot from. And if I'm gonna pick a group of people who had the most impact on my life, would be definitely founders. They're resilient. They're pushing boundaries. They're looking into I would say almost everything as an opportunity, which is the way every one of us should be looking at challenges facing us. So I think I learned a lot from the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And I usually say I'm a product of this ecosystem because I literally spent all my life over there. Yes, I had a couple of full-time jobs. I did a lot of stuff when it's come to marketing and business development, but I'm still heavily involved in the ecosystem. And I love this involvement because it's helping me a lot on the personal level and on the, I would say on the business level.
Well, that's really great. And so how old is your particular chapter of Startup Grind?
I think our chapter is like 8 years old, 9 years
Okay.
old, something like that. We were one of the first chapters worldwide. I think the chapter have been operating since 2014 or 13. So we're talking about almost 8 years. Personally, I've been leading the chapter for 2 years and a half. We did, I think, around 22 events or 23 events. I'm not sure. We hosted around 50 speakers. 46% out of them are females. We hosted, I think, over than 10 investors, and we had three pitching sessions with some of the leading investors in our region, including startups.
One of the reasons why we are doing this global check-in with the directors from around the planet is that this pandemic is shortening a lot of supply chains, right? As far as manufacturing is concerned or agriculture, but there is an incredible globalization of ideas, and there's a globalization of network effect. For example, just in how we as a planet are attacking the financial crisis in a very, what looks to be a coordinated way with all of our central banks, and then also medically with coming up with this vaccine. Papers are being written and shared and peer reviewed, and drugs are being collaborated on with such speed. So much innovation is happening right now at such a great pace, and a lot of international coordination. So the opportunities that we get to uncover here come first from breaking down the stereotypes that we might have from one region about another. And so what would you say are the big stereotypes that we can address in our short conversation today about your region that prevents investors or, from coming into your region and saying, hey, what's going on down there?
I think there's this Silicon Valley US-based entrepreneurship and the rest of the world, and most of the major investors worldwide tend to invest in the United States and forgot about the rest of the world. And I would say 10 years ago, they had a point, but right now the situation is really, really different, especially in Europe, especially in Asia, and in the MENA region. I'm going to share with you in a bit the numbers from last year. So I would say when it comes to the MENA region, a lot of people think we're just producing oil, and that's not the case. The majority of the economies in this region, including the oil countries, are no longer based on oil money at all, including, for example, United Arab Emirates or Bahrain or Qatar. They're doing, and now with Saudi Vision 2030, they're basically moving their whole economy toward entertainment, technology, hospitality, and all aspects. So technically speaking, if you ask anyone about the Gulf or GCC specific, they were going to be, there's a lot of oil money, and that's no longer the case. In the MENA region generally, it's going to be like we're still riding camels, and unfortunately, we have flying taxis in Dubai. And we have I would say the majority of the MENA region have internet infrastructure better than most of the areas in the United States. But it's the case. When people have stereotype, you don't easily change it. So it's what happened. It's like saying, for an example, every American eats burger, but like that's not the case. So yeah, those I think the main stereotypes. For regular people, it's camels, it's oil money. For investors, like nothing is happening over there. It's still too early. But for an example, and it's a fact, the most active fund in the MENA region is an American fund. It's 500 startups, and Y Combinator is backing many startups in the region recently, and we're seeing a lot of Europeans, a lot of Americans, and a lot of money coming from Asia and China also to the region. So far, the money in the region are still, I would say, the majority are still coming from the region. We're relatively a rich region. When we look at the diversity now, I think we have around 30% of the money invested in the startups coming mainly from the United States and Europe and China. So those are mainly some of the stereotypes. But generally speaking, Amazon did a major acquisition in the MENA region 3 years ago. Uber just acquired Careem, which is a competitor that gave them a very, very hard time over the past 5 years, and they couldn't knock them out of the market in any way, despite the fact they spend so much money in comparison to the money Careem spent. But at the end of the day, they acquired Careem for $3.2 billion US, and Souq was acquired to Amazon for $600 million US, which was like the largest e-commerce platform. So and when it comes to technology generally, Microsoft, Oracle, Amazon have data centers here, have major offices. Facebook have a major office here. Twitter also. So far, from a technology point of view, most of the countries in the region have 90% plus social media penetration. Almost every country have around 100% internet penetration.
Right. I'm really grateful for that picture that you're painting. Now, to get into some of the different parts of what an ecosystem is comprised of, one of the biggest parts that's important is talent. Can you speak a little bit about the talent pool that is available, like immediately in your area, and then also in the region, and if that's something that is like globalized, like if there's a lot of freelance work, or if people are working in your region but they live elsewhere?
Freelancing is a big thing in the region so far, like everywhere in the region. Even if you take the MENA region or the Middle East as at large, to include Pakistan, there's a lot of freelancing happening. When it comes to Jordan, where I live, companies like Expedia, Microsoft, Oracle have major tech offices here, either on the support side or either on the development side. So Expedia, for example, is one of the major employers when it comes to technology in Jordan. Also, we have Autodesk. We have almost every major tech brand can come in your mind, whether from the United States or whether from Europe or whether from China, operating in the region, and most of them have developers based out of here. There are some countries in the region are known for their talent, like Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon. Lebanese are mainly focused on business related, like PR, business, marketing. Jordan are focusing 100% on technology, pure engineering, pure development. Egypt are almost everywhere. It's a massive country, so they're over 100 million people. So they're covering all the sectors. So taking into consideration talent-wise, that's not a challenge at all in this region. Actually, we have relatively cheap labor. Like, I wouldn't say it's as cheap as East Europe, but taking into consideration the quality, it's some sort of, it's a package. So you need to look into how much you're paying, how much the quality you're getting. I think Jordan, for an example, is a great place to have your tech office here. And I think we have over than 25 tech offices for international companies in Amman, which is relatively a very small city. It's less than 3 million people.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. And that's one of the best resources, right? We can have. Also, there's the challenge in some more emerging markets where the mindset has to be, we don't have a talent shortage, we have an education issue, because talent is all around you, right? If there's bodies, there's talent.
I don't think even in the MENA region there is any issue with education. In Jordan, right. Almost 50% of the graduates now are coming from relatively engineering/technology departments, And when we look at countries like Saudi, Egypt, Emirates, Qatar, Oman, even Jordan, you will see a lot of our universities are in the top 500 universities worldwide. So, and when it's come to with the maybe the cost of those universities are not relatively affordable, but generally speaking, if you're looking at well-educated people in the region, that's not a challenge at all. People are getting some of the best education in the world, and most of the global major universities are actually operating in the region. Like, for example, New York University have a branch in Abu Dhabi, the American University in Cairo and the American University in Beirut are doing exceptional job. We have the American University also in Abu Dhabi. We have some local universities have been there for hundreds of years. They're well known.
Yeah, we spoke to a chapter director in Pisa, Lucca, over in Italy, and that's a region also that has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of history of being, a top innovator and focus on education. And then we went around the world and we found folks. We talked to people outside, like say in the Gambia on the west side of Africa, where there isn't such a heritage of education or support from the education system. So these universities that you're talking about and having such a strong focus on education, do they have like innovation hubs? Are they a critical part of the ecosystem, or are they just pushing out really great grads?
Let's start by universities. I'm just gonna give you an overview of the innovation landscape. So when it comes to universities, most of universities now have their own accelerators/incubators. By law in Egypt, I think within 2 years, every university must have an incubator. The majority of incubators here in Jordan, universities here in Jordan have their own incubators. The same applies on Saudi, same applies on Emirates. This is not only the case. The case here is also private companies are having their own incubators and accelerators. So I think, for example, in Jordan, there is one company, Zain, one of our partners at Startup Grind, have 7 incubators across the country. We're talking about a small country like Jordan. They have almost an incubator in every governance. And we're talking about very, very small governance. Like most of it are less than 1 million people. That's the case. Most of the other corporates also have their own incubators. Most of incubators here, if they don't have incubator accelerator, they have their own startups competitions. So every year they will have an award ceremony, or they would have a community activities with entrepreneurs, or they're directly investing in startups or investing in communities like Startup Grind to support those startups. So innovation landscape here is fully backed by government on the first layer, then education, then corporates. So if you wanna start a startup here, I would say the in-kind support is not your challenge. Usually the challenge is when you need to raise $100 million for your company.
100 million.
At that moment, you need to go outside the region. But before that, you're completely fine. We have massive funds. I think we have some funds now. Have $1 billion funds in the region. And we have a lot of funds are backed by the governments, or either backed by their own funds. Like some of the governments have its own funds, basically, like Saudi and United Arab Emirates. And recently, Jordan also announced a fund that is in collaboration between the Jordanian Central Bank and the World Bank it's 100 million Jordanian dinars, which is around 140 million US dollars fund. It's basically, technically speaking, the government money. And sure, this is a trend all over the region. Not only that, but the governments here are working very, very hard on reviewing all the regulations to get companies like Amazon, Oracle, Microsoft to open their data centers within the region. So Bahrain, for example, is the home of AWS centers in the region. Saudi is hosting a couple of major data centers for Oracle. Same applies on others. Egypt also hosting Cabo. So when it's come to the infrastructure, innovation, and space for it, I don't think that's a challenge at all in the region.
Would you be able to talk a little bit more about that, the public support, as far as the government support, especially as it relates to the individual entrepreneur, whether that is publicly funded or sponsored or partnered, innovation like centers? Like how does one get plugged in and get that support, and what kind of support are they looking at?
Let me talk about Jordan because I can know all the details. So for example, in Jordan, if you're starting a company right now, you can work from any of the incubators of the private sector companies. All of it are for free. Or you can work from one of the government incubators, which is, I think it's around 225, something like that. And you just need to apply and you get in and you start working from there. And also the government for tech startups supports, I think, up to 10 employees salaries for your first year as a founder. So if you just started a tech company in Jordan, you can just apply to the Ministry of Entrepreneurship and Digital Economy, and they pay half of the salaries of your employees for the first year. The next step is basically going to accelerators and incubators, and it's let's say accelerators, or going to funds, which is in Jordan, the largest fund is a governmental fund. Same applies in Saudi, same applies in United Arab Emirates, same applies on Qatar, same applies in Oman, same applies on even Bahrain. All those countries have the largest funds are coming from the government. When it's come to the media support, we're having now TV shows on entrepreneurship all across the region. Entrepreneurs are being featured on TV more than ministers and more than government officials. And in our region, we are looking very highly to our founders, and we want to push them to the max because we believe they can bring the change that we need in the region.
That's really incredible that you have such support from the ecosystem, the successful founders. That is that level of mentorship, and for the small entrepreneur that's just getting started, for them to see somebody that looks like them that's being successful is really important, right? So, yeah, we talked about talent. We talked about resources. That's money. We also we talked about the support of the ecosystem as far as ideas and education. Can you speak a little bit about maybe some of the very specific and individual stories that you're familiar with, like people in your ecosystem that you know of, and some of the fun innovations that they are working on now or have recently developed?
I'm just gonna give you a very short, I would say, brief on what's happening here from a funding point of view, and then I'm gonna mention a few stories that I love in the region. So, for example, Egypt is the country that's leading the ecosystem when it's come to the number of deals, when it's come to the investments in their startups. United Arab Emirates is leading when it's come to the value of those deals. In 2019, startups in the region got 704 millions of funding. Those represents 564 deals. The average deal is around $2 million. The most funded sector when it's come to number of deals is fintech, and when it's come to funding is transport. It's transport and logistics is a very, very big challenge over here. And startups like Uber, Careem, and Swivel, which is one of my favorite stories from the region, are working on fixing it. The most active VC is 500 startups, as I mentioned. The most active accelerator is Flat 6 Labs. I think they have operations in 6 or 7 countries in the region. When it's come to the trends, as I mentioned, the logistics sector are getting a lot of money to solve major, I would say, let's say major issues facing some of the region businesses and companies. Also, when it's come to the breakdown, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, and Jordan are the top 5 countries. when it's come to the number of the deals. United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Lebanon are on the top when it's come to the value of the deals. 60% of this money goes directly to companies in the United Arab Emirates, especially in Dubai. Dubai is the Silicon Valley of our region, let's say. So, or let's say it's San Francisco of our region. The fintech got around 13% of the number of the deals, and 19% of the money were invested in 2019 went to the delivery and transport. 15% went to the real estate, and 14% went to the commerce. We had 27 exits in 2019, a record number. The largest exit was definitely Kareem to Uber. The largest funding rounds was AMBG from Emirates. They got $100 million. Yellow Door Energy got $65 million. Swivel, I just mentioned, from Egypt, got $42 million. And jumping into stories I love in our region, I love, for an example, Mawdou.com. They're Jordan-based. They are the world's largest Arabic content creator. Swivel, I just mentioned, are some sort of a on-demand bus company, buses company that you can just book a bus. There is some sort of an alternative to the public transportation. It's a massive challenge over here, and the quality is not something that people are like a lot. Tracker is also a very, very promising startup. I think they're backed by YC, and they're doing some sort of trucks management, some sort of, let's say, Uber for trucks. There were like one extra story I love from the region is Tomatum. Tomatum means tomato in English. The MENA region largest gaming publisher, and they're working with every major studio in the world to make their games available in Arabic. And they're almost in the top. Their games are almost always on the top 10. Let's say games on App Store and Google Play Store, and it's one of the most funded Jordanian startups too. So generally speaking, most of the innovation here it's happening in the sectors where there's massive challenge for the mass. Mm-hmm. Logistics, e-commerce, transport, and also there's some stories in the content, some success stories in the content area, I would say, which has been a challenge, and I think it's still a challenge here, where Arabs are almost 500 million people around the world, but the content online that represents Arabs are still less than 2%. Right. Of the total internet. So we're also pushing startups to go for creating content and help others create content in order for us to accelerate the quality content we have in Arabic online.
Speaking a little bit more about the sectors you brought up obviously energy, and then e-commerce, logistics, fintech. Is there any significant innovation or focus on medicine, education, or agriculture?
I would say in education, we have a couple of successful stories. Abwab works with the government here in Jordan and other couple of governments in the region into training their education system into some sort of an online experience. And they benefited a lot from the pandemic, because basically the government has to go 100% online in a matter of days. Yeah. We have an academy also in Saudi. They're not only in Saudi, they're almost everywhere in the region. And I think they're a home of 2 million persons using their services to get education on a daily basis. When it's come to agriculture, unfortunately, this is one of the areas that still didn't boom in the region, because I do believe most of the major countries in the region are still a little bit, I wouldn't say they're agriculture focused countries. Egypt, for an example, have a couple of stories, but still not major stories when it's come to agriculture, because Egypt is a massive country when it's come to agriculture. But generally speaking, agriculture is not one of the areas where we're booming yet. When it comes to medicine, usually here it's not startups, but corporates. We have a couple of medicine companies based here out of Jordan, producing and exporting medicine to everyone in the world, and including the region. And yeah, I don't. There is more focus on what can be easily digitized in comparison to massive hardware, massive IoT startups, because I wouldn't say our ecosystem is as mature as other ecosystems. So I wouldn't say hardware startups are getting the same amount of funding software-based or SaaS companies are getting, because you know how VCs things. They want to take risks, but it has to be calculated risks, and it has to be somehow short-term risks. And hardware, as we all know, it's a very long-term risk, and it requires so much money when it's come to funding, and requires waiting way more time, I would say. If you want to exit a software company, that usually take 5 years, but if you want to exit hardware company, that might take 10 years. So also, if you look at the challenges, IoT startups here, whatever the industry they're operating in, are facing big challenges when it's come to funding.
Right. Now on that funding thing, you spoke about like, hey, yeah, if you need more than 100 million, you got to go outside the region. So that's not usually the story we're hearing from the directors that we're checking in with. Oftentimes our conversation is really about that earliest funding. And you mentioned that there are resources that are pretty easily found. So if I'm an entrepreneur, and I've got an idea, and it's a software idea, and it's pretty well flushed out, can I get some angel on just on a good idea, or do I have to have an MVP?
Usually here in the region, you need to have an MVP to get investment, especially from accelerators. Like, they prefer to have you having an MVP. Some ideas were smart enough to manage to get some money from angels on the very, very early stages. The angel experience cannot be somehow organized. It's always based on an individual deciding to believe in you. And I think this is the case worldwide. If a couple of angels decide to believe in you as a person and give you money, and they are, let's say, sure you're gonna deliver, you basically can get I would say up to 100K from angels. Usually it requires someone who have great experience on what he's about to do to get such amount of money. And a good thing about our region, things are quite relatively cheap in comparison to the United States. So 100K US dollars in the region is a good money here. I know it's almost nothing in Silicon Valley. So you get it usually if, let's say, for example, if you're building something into transport and you're ex-Uber or ex-Careem, people will sure that you were there, you know how it works. But if you're just a fresh grad who don't have any experience, have not done anything before, you will usually mostly go for friends and family, not for angels, because usually they will start calculating and doing evaluation and stuff, and they mostly will end up not giving you much money.
And now I'd like to go back to talking about and finish up talking about your specific startup grind community and the people that you're advocating on behalf. So in these last months, it's been a somewhat shared global experience with different levels of shutting down and pivoting and introspection on entrepreneurs, like, do I even have customers anymore? am I even relevant as a business? And so I'm interested in hearing about a couple of the conversations that you might have had with some of your community and some of the advice that you've found yourself giving over and over for entrepreneurs, especially as now when much of the world is looking at, okay, we are reopening, and how do I relaunch?
Um, I'm just gonna answer this on this question with two things. The first thing is like my advice was 3 months ago. Please act fast and make sure your cash flow is somehow gonna be available for the longest possible time. And please spend the cash you have very wisely now. On the other hand, Startup Grow in Amman, usually we act as somehow a platform to bring people who can give advice to people who need advice. So last week we had a panel on reopening the economy, and we had a couple of ex-ministers, and we had someone from BWC, and we had someone from the medical sector and someone from the tourism sector, and their advices were mainly toward the community in general and the government in specific. So the people coming from an economical background, they were like, governments need to make sure they're up and running. They make sure they don't let's say spend the money they currently have unless they really need it. Also, one of them mentioned something that's very important on the government making sure there is a proper social security and making sure the social community and the community is not harmed by the pandemic, because if there is a social issues, managing people expectation and managing the people itself, if we need to go back to lockdown, can be very hard. Unfortunately, I'm super lucky to live in a country where the government and the community believe a lot in science, and we had a strict lockdown than Italy, and people still worked on it with the government. On the other hand, from businesses, everyone was like, make sure to spend your money wisely. Also to hunt talent if you have extra money, because talent is quite relatively cheap right now. A little bit cheaper, and the competition is relatively way less, I would say. Mm-hmm. And we actually saw major companies like Facebook and Amazon hiring nonstop and even accelerating hiring within the past quarter, because they know that they finally don't have competition over employees. The last thing was to our government, basically, to if they need to borrow money from outside or from inside, they make sure to spend it on not on salaries, not on things like that, but on things that actually can bring money back to the government and can bring money back to the people. So those are mainly the things that were discussed in the event. There were a lot of medical stuff. It's not business relative at all, where people have to listen to the government when it comes to the lockdown, where governments have to be super transparent with people and do more testing and everything that WHO basically advise every government to do, and open when it's the right time to open. And because opening the economy didn't work out with some countries already, and their cases have been surging massively, and I think Florida and California is going through this right now. So those were the things, generally speaking, were discussed. I'm not sure if I missed anything, but those, I would say, the most of the stuff mentioned.
That's awesome. I'm really grateful for such a thorough response, and the fact that you had a panel just about that last week is awesome. Perfectly timed.
They have to be relevant in a way, And if there is one more thing I would like to share when it's come to when you said stereotypes and stuff,
Yeah.
I think most of my American friends are not believing how governments in my region reacted to the to let's say contain the COVID-19. And for an example, a country like Jordan have less than 1,000 case, and they did around 300,000 tests. Country like Emirates is the world leading country when it's come to testing per million. They almost tested 30% of their citizens. Country like Saudi and Qatar, despite the fact they have around 5,000 cases a day, their fatality rate is 0.4%, which is they're not even 1%.
Right.
And almost most of the countries in the region, the fatality rate is under 1%, and the recovery rate is around 80%.
That's those are some impressive numbers, and unfortunately, we do have we've got some really good data, and we have that good data because we have all the different cases of how people have reacted. So we have the outliers on both sides, reacting well and reacting not so well. So and we're told by the experts around the world that this is no longer such a, I hate this term, black swan. Like it's we're now living in a time where this is more of the normal. So we should be better prepared to react, not just on this second wave that's hitting the planet now, but in different places, but as other pandemics emerge. So last thing is we spoke a little bit before we were hitting record. The importance of globalization is happening with ideas and education and opportunity. Despite deglobalization of some supply chains and some sectors, what can the global startup grind community do for you?
I think if I'm discussing it from an individual point of view, I think startup grind community is like a major, like a massive field of flowers. Every flower have its own color, have its own smell, and have its own look. I remember the first time I went to Global, I were like around a lot of people, like hundreds of people, and the only thing that I have in common with everyone is technically speaking sort of wine. And then I started talking to everyone, and we have a very beautiful, very diverse, very inclusive community, I would say. And if there's something I learned from Startup Grind is appreciating change, appreciating inclusivity, and acting super fast. We went from zero virtual events in March, in February technically, to over than 300 virtual events just in March. I think we have around 1,000 events virtually now across Startup Grind worldwide. Some of other communities worldwide stopped completely for weeks. Well, I think we delivered on every partnership we had, especially the global partnerships, and those hundreds of events. And I think it's a great opportunity to thank our partners at Bevy, because I think without Bevy, I think Bevy made us somehow an online company by default, I would say.
Right.
So diversity, inclusion, acting fast, being ready for the future, and also believing a lot in minorities. And when we look now at what Derek Anderson, our CEO, is doing for the Black community and for other minorities, it's really beautiful seeing companies sending our messages that loud, I would say. It's lovely. I think I learned a lot from Startup Grind more than anywhere else. It's not the typical learnings. It's not something you learn because you were doing your work. It's just what you learn from being around uh, a very, very diverse group of people. And the fact to be around people from 125 countries, I think it's a blessing. I think it's a privilege a lot of people in the world don't have, including people who work for international companies, but they just operate in 10 or 20 different countries. So it's a blessing. It's something I would like to thank Derek and G for all their effort to grow our community globally, and for all definitely our partners and our sponsors, locally and internationally, for believing in Startup Grind, and pushing us to do more and more and more for the community. So yeah, that's my individual experience, I would say. I think when it's come to community wise and community from a community aspect in Jordan, we managed to get a lot of international / regional speakers to Amman. Um, we managed to do a lot of cool stuff. I'm personally very, very proud of. Last year, for an example, the government introduced a lot of new regulations for the e-commerce industry, and we were the first entity to host the Minister of Digital Economy and Entrepreneurship, to have a discussion with over than 200 persons from the ecosystem to discuss the future of the e-commerce industry. We hosted some amazing ladies from either Jordan and from the region. So yeah, just to give you a fact, when I took over the chapter, it was 0% female. Like the chapter never had a female speaker. We now have 46% or 48%. I think if I want to include this year numbers, I think we're over than 50% female speakers, for example. And we do our events in venues that is accessible. We're trying to be as inclusive as possible.
And I think what's important also to recognize is that all the benefits that you have mentioned with regards to the inclusivity of the community, it's open to everybody, right? So
Yeah.
like the experience that you've had is available to anyone and it doesn't cost anything.
We're very, very open community. And for example, in Amman, we never charged anyone to attend an event. Thanks to our sponsors, we had our expenses always covered. And we never charged anyone to attend a Startup Grind event in Amman, for example. Especially under my management of the chapter. So I'm a person who believes in inclusion and believe in openness, and as you mentioned, it's an experience open for everyone, not only on the chapter level, it's also on the global level. Everyone is welcome to join Startup Grind Global, or join Startup Grind Europe, or the other conferences our fellow chapter directors are organizing in Pakistan, Georgia, Australia, almost everywhere in the region, in the world.
Yeah, so I wish we had more time, because it's been really enlightening, and I'm sure there's a lot more to learn about your region, especially, and I would love to have been able to learn more about you as well.
I think you should like the best way to learn about region is always visiting it. So
I will see you soon, and I look forward to sharing a meal with you.
yeah, I definitely can invite you for a Jordanian mansaf. I hope you can handle it, and I hope you're not vegetarian like me, so you can try it. So yeah, it's and also something else about our region. It has most of the wonders of the world. Like if you're in Jordan, you can visit Petra. If you're in Egypt, you can visit the pyramids. If you're a Muslim, you can visit Saudi for sure to do Umrah or Hajj. If you're in Emirates, you can see Burj Khalifa, the tallest building ever in the history. There is a lot to see, and the region hosts 2 of the Formula One races, host 2 of the Formula E races, host 1 of the MotoGP races, The region is hosting in 2 years the World Cup, Football World Cup. There is a million reasons to visit the MENA region, and there is a lot happening, and it's super, super diverse. No matter your interest, you will find something to do.
I've always been a fan of the region's history and like knowledge, the base of knowledge. I mean,
I was very, very shocked when I learned that they teach the students in the United States about the Egyptian history. I was very, very, very like impressed and happy.
so I look forward to seeing you in person, and then I see you wearing your global wristband. So should we be able to do that in person this next year? Looking forward to seeing you there
I
too.
think we're gonna travel anyway. I think most of the chapters directors I know, they won't miss it. I think.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be in California in just a few weeks, and I'm doing a road trip across the country, visiting a bunch of chapter directors on my way. I'll be
Cool.
doing this show from all over the United States.
Are you planning to do this in February or? Yeah.
This is in July, so
Okay.
yeah,
That's very
yeah,
interesting. I look forward to watch the videos and to watch and listen to the conversation you're gonna have with them. Because I do believe the US is a very, very diverse place. And for someone like me, it's not very, very easy for me to visit every place. And I
right.
know that every city in the United States have different culture, different background, different economic, different political interests.
Yeah, the United States is an interesting case because we are such a young country, and different parts of the country are younger than the United States. And compare that to the deep history of regions like your own. It's just we are a grain of sand in the desert of knowledge that comes from your region. So it's
I
pretty
think you gotta
wild.
manage to harvest every knowledge the world had,
Yeah.
taken advantage of that. And I think it's one of the key learnings of the United States. Always start where others finished. You don't
Hmm.
have to start from the beginning. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just look outside, see what others have done, and then it's something I always say to startups: don't invent the wheel. The wheel is already there. Just enhance it. Make it works
Right.
better.
That's a real great way to end this up. I really am truly grateful for the generosity of your time and attention, and it's an honor to make your acquaintance. And I look forward to a long friendship in the future. All right, Mo.
Thank you so much for having me. The honor is all mine and the pleasure is all mine. And look forward to hosting you in the region.
All right, ciao, my friend.
Bye.